Welcome to the Sports Perspective, your number one destination for untold stories about the sports world. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Sports Perspective. Today, I'm being joined by an award-winning creative director. He's won an Emmy, Clio, Webby, Lumiere, and BDA awards, multiple of every single one. Please welcome Larry Jones. How you doing today, Larry?
Hey, I'm doing great, Patrick. Thanks for having me on, man.
Of course, I'm excited to talk about your story. So I wanted to start one place in particular because one thing I find very interesting is we had like a very similar um, college career, and that we both started in marine biology, and so I ended up moving to communications, and I believe you switched to marketing, correct?
Yeah. It was actually my first major was supposed to be architecture at Fitchburg State, and that was a construction major, I guess. It was CON, but like an idiot, I wrote COM, which is film at Fitchburg State. And back then, film wasn't digital; it was all like chemicals and like development and stuff. And my mom, we didn't have a lot of cash, so the extra like whatever 3,000 a year was the reason I didn't do film because of the extra money. So I ended up going into I redid it and went into construction architecture, and I was terrible at I was that wasn't computer based either. It was all like technical drawing, so I was a slob and a little dash by mistake here, a little schmeg here pretty much equates to like the bathroom wall blowing up, you know? And so I just had my focus issues were terrible. So I moved into oceanography because I thought that was cool. And then that wasn't satisfying enough at Fitchburg State. So then I ended up going to Florida to school at NOAA Southeastern University for marine biology. Yes.
How did that end up turning into marketing?
A lot of drinking. Like it was that school. I was supposed to go to the University of Virgin Islands. I visited, got accepted, and it was like, I love scuba diving. I love, the thought of swimming with dolphins like that. I'm sure you had some of these things in your brain when you went to marine biology.
Oh
So,
yeah.
but then unfortunately, 2 weeks before I was supposed to fly to St. Thomas, where I go to school, the there was a massive default on all the student loans that the United States were loaning out. So they refused to give any loans. So they like shut me down. So I had 2 weeks to do rolling admissions. That's why I ended up in Fort Lauderdale at Nova Southeastern. So when I went there, it wasn't like hands-on. Like in St. Thomas, your dorm was literally on the ocean, the Caribbean Sea. It was like, and
Oh wow.
you were swimming with dolphins like right away. This school, it was like pretty much pre-med, and like senior year, you get to like go on boats and stuff. So that I wasn't seeing the reward there, and it was like super, a lot of work. All the professors would come in, rolling in their like rusty Pintos, like they had like three PhDs. I was like, this is not worth it. So I got out of that and went to marketing. There's business administration and marketing minor. And then yeah, and then I didn't know what I wanted to do. I bartended, and then I went to hospital because I had spent so much time in the hospitality world. When I graduated, I was like, okay, I guess I'll go work for like a hotel. And I worked for a hotel for a year. But when I was there, the one of the office manager who we had, she was really cool and she was working on this like weird thing, like I was like, what are you working on? She's like, oh, it's the flyer for the Mother's Day buffet. And I was like, what is this you're doing? And she's like, digital graphic design. I'm using clip art. I'm like, this is magic. It's like clip art's like the lowest life form of graphic design. But back then I was like, this is amazing. So I said, go to lunch. And so she did. And I just sat there. I was like, a week later, I quit. And I went back to school. Went to Clark University. And then I went to Rhode Island School of Design. And that was like my path in that world.
And that was for the graphics and like visual effects production, which is
Yeah, the
then what
whole
you gotta do.
pretty
Yep.
much communications, but focusing on the visual communication side. That's like the broad way to describe that. You know what I mean?
That's awesome. So it's my understanding that coming out of like the graphics and visual effects production school, the plan wasn't always to get in sports. I mean, you spent your career doing sports, sure, but also doing weather, news, commercials, working with celebrities. So talk to me about like what your relationship with sports was growing up and how you felt when you started getting into working on sports.
Oh yeah, okay. So when I was younger, I went to a really small school taught by nuns. And so there was no or and I was in a really small like town, like total boonies, like rural farms and stuff. So organized sports was like not even a thing, right? Like so I think the only organized sports I was actually in was like Little League. Like so I did like baseball. And then at school, I loved sports. We had basketball hoop, we had soccer, kickball. I played all kinds of sports, but I wasn't awesome because I didn't know what I was doing. There was no train like nowadays, like you get shunned for playing multiple sports organized, right? Because like they force you into like my son played hockey, right? Maddie played hockey, and he played soccer and hockey, and then eventually the soccer teams were like, "No, man, you need to put all your effort into this," which I think is a shame. That's like a whole nother topic, right? Because then you start getting injuries because you're using the same thing for like 12 years, your same hip muscle or whatever. So anyway, yeah. So but I loved sports. And I was always kind of bitter that I didn't have that. So when I was a very creative person. So in this, my industry didn't exist. It was all like a graphic designer was like some dude who, was a screen printer. It was very like trades, like you wear work boots and like hang out with the metals guys and you'd like do that wasn't me either. So not that I have anything wrong with that. But so when I was right on the cusp of when digital graphic design became a thing. So that opened up the crazy doors. So I loved that. And sports, I loved. I was like a big Patriots fan, even before Tom Brady, right? Bruins and Red Sox, from that area, born in Boston. So it was always in my world. And my father was from Oklahoma, so he was like a massive Sooners fan. Like I grew up watching that stuff too. So I mean, I think, yeah, I guess that as a whole, organized sports wasn't my thing because of just the happenstance. But then so then when I got older, so then when I ended up working, so I ended up wanting to do commercials. Like that was my goal, is to do commercials. Like literally, I didn't want to do movies or film, or I want to do commercials. But I live in Massachusetts at that time, right? So it's like there's no industry for what I do. I'd have to move to New York or LA. And at that point, I had already got involved, started like the whole family life. My daughter was just born, and so then, and I started working at like local news affiliates in Boston. Like I worked at, it was a CW, it was in Dorchester, they closed it down. I worked for that affiliate. And then I worked for Channel 5. Was that WLVI? I can't remember what it was. It's still there, but so it was in Needham. So I started getting into the broadcast world there, thinking that was a nice little path. 5 years before that, I was, working in Southie on, projects like interactive stuff. It wasn't even that world, but I started wanting to go to commercials. So I had an opportunity. So I was like, how am I going to get to commercials? I got to do network TV, like legit network, not local news. What's the closest thing? Oh, ESPN's right in Bristol, Connecticut. All right. Fast forward 5 months of interviews, I got a job there. So that's when I sort of took the next leap into being a sports fan because you're at ESPN. You know what I mean? So I had the opportunity to work with like no, my favorite was Nomar Garcia Parra. I like literally worked intimately with him like on a project where he was the subject matter expert at a thing called the virtual pitch that I was creating, where in the studio they'd be talking about pitches that are happening like hours before in some game, and suddenly the studio would become alive and become that baseball field, the state like because we partnered with like MLB the Game, and then we would actually inject the game into a green screen world in the studio, and then I built out the system where the trajectory of that pitch and the spin and everything was actually virtual for Nomar to talk about. So he could pause that pitch if it was like a curve and the ball would progress. He'd say, pause this, and also you see the spin. And he'd start talking about the spin and how that actually happens. So I mean, that was an awesome experience because like he was talking about his poppy and how he's like, yeah, man, I remember going out in the field. It was like a total, like I could have had a whole podcast back then of just those experiences. And I just over time, I was there for 12 years. Over time, I just like really started loving sports and started being like, yeah, man, like getting next level. Of course, parlay that with like Tom Brady, you know, in the early 2000s. It was like, that's when I really started getting into it. But, and then hanging out with everybody. Most of the people that were in my world, like doing graphics, their love was not graphics first. It was sports first. And they fit in a career to be in the sports world. Like if they weren't at ESPN, they wouldn't have been happy. I was the opposite. I had a 2-year plan. I was going to bounce and then go to New York and then go to LA. But then the family thing, the roots, that didn't happen. So, but yeah, hopefully that answers something.
Yeah, that was a great answer. I want to bounce around a little bit because my interns were doing like a lot of research, surfing through your website, looking at all the work you've done. And I think one place I want to start is you ended up working on the augmented reality open for Super Bowl 53. You directed it, right? So what was that like? What's the environment like working, on a project for the Super Bowl? And then like did it feel any different because the Patriots were in it? Like did it
My
almost feel like a
God.
more heightened experience?
For me, hell yeah. My best experience was we had to do a test for the Super Bowl, but we did it at the AFC Divisional Championships, which coincidentally happened to be at Gillette Stadium because they were playing the Chargers, and that year in the divisional, deciding who's going to go to the Super Bowl. So that was the most amazing experience for me ever because we had it was for CBS. We had like passes, all access. I'm on the field. There's Tom Brady, John Bon Jovi, and Bob Kraft. They're just like standing there, right? So Tom Brady was doing something, and I didn't give a crap about John Bon Jovi, right? And all of a sudden there was Bob Kraft. And I was like, oh my God, I gotta do it, I gotta do it. So he was like on his phone, no one was talking to me. I went right up to him and he was like startled, like, oh my God, it was gonna kill me. I was like, Mr. Kraft, just a guy, I gotta say, man, thank you so much for everything you did from this franchise. I remember my dad crying, in the 90s, and you saved this franchise and stuff. He was like, and while I'm a goofball, so I was like shaking his hand and I was grabbing his like arm. I was like, he actually put it was ripped. And I was like, dude, you're ripped. To let's try stuff. But so he was like, oh, thanks. It was like pretty much gonna call a bodyguard over to like grab me, but that was like my most memorable thing for that. But then we were like all over it. Like, so then my job was to creatively come up with the entire open, like what's gonna happen. It was originally supposed to be only a 6-second open, like where it was this little thing that shows up Lombardi Trophy at the bottom of the screen, and they wanted to like up level that up, and so mine was this like really cool thing, the idea where the Lombardi Trophy was going to also break out of the field, look like it's really happening in real time, and build up into the Lombardi Trophy. And that became such a thing that in the end they made the open. Like it was like a 25-second open that started the entire show. And so the creative process of that was coming up with a storyline. How many cameras are those going to be? Like, what was going to be happening? Okay, now how are we going to do that? Like they have to be live cameras. What kind of cameras are they? Well, we want to utilize the cable cam, the spider cam flying at 13 miles an hour. It'd be amazing to get these like crazy epic shots. And we want to have like shots that are down, like organic shots on the field, whether it's handheld or steady cam, and then move to like other sweeping stuff. So I designed all those shots. We call that previs. So in 3D app, like in that case it was Unreal Engine, we actually were blocking the whole thing out. So the divisional championship, it was me working with the Spider Cam guys and like during their breaks, showing them my laptop of what I wanted to do. And because they're the guys in Atlanta that would be doing it. And so the way that the Spider Cam works is there's one person that's controlling the movement of it, the position, and there's another guy that's controlling the zoom and the pan and the tilt. And they're working it's like Pacific Rim, if you ever saw Pacific Rim.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like it was very similar to that, right? So they're like, oh, dude, we can't do that move because see your techno crane that's on the ground there because for the last shot, your techno crane was doing it. It's up, and we're not allowed to get close to that because of safety issues. So you have to change your shots around. So they worked with me to change all this shit around so it actually would work. And then I came up with a cadence because like it's not robots, it's not motion control doing all these things. It's like real people. So they have to know that when we say ready camera 2, they have to start moving, be in motion, go camera 2, and then that's the guy with the steady cam down the ground looking at something that's not even there. Like he's pointing at something that's not even there yet. So they all have like screens that show their camera feed, but they show the dirty camera feed, which is my stuff on top of it. But every one of those cameras are tracked optically with tracking technology so that we know And for every frame, every millisecond where that camera is, we know we have a digital doppelganger of it in our world, with that camera and the three-dimensional version of the stadium all lined up to scale. Like, so everything has to be completely coordinated so that the dirty feed of the Lombardi trophy that's stuck to the ground, that's bursting out of the ground, looks like it's not just like when you have a bad like iPhone AR experience and it's like just popping and stuff. Like that's we can't do that. So it has to look legit. So and then you're coordinating. So it's like, okay, ready cable, the Spire cam. That thing has to start moving, but that has like centrifugal force. So I want that for the last shot as well. So it's like the second shot and the last shot, but it can't be like wiggling around because they're coming to a rest. So there's all this crazy stuff that we had to like simulate and plan ahead of time. So, and at the very end, like it was awesome because you're like, at any moment something could break. It's all real time. And then, yeah, so at the very end, they're pulling out and everything was built and stuff. And all of a sudden you hear it's on my website. You hear like them over talking and showing shots of Brady in the locker room and stuff. That was exciting, man, I would say.
Yeah, it sounds crazy. I mean, the Super Bowl is like the biggest stage, especially for US sports fans. Something else I wanted to ask you about is you won a Disney Imagineering Award for your
Yeah,
work.
sure. Where is it? This puppy.
Oh, wow.
They see Mickey Mouse is on it too. But yeah,
That's
so
really cool.
that was I went to World Cup for a month in South Africa, and my job was I created this product, well, I should say experience, so that in the studio when they go into the South African studio and they talk about all the different what's going on in the game, or they're talking about the players' injuries or whatever it was. In this case, it was the U.S. team. The idea was that we did something called a player card. So it's like a thing, but like that full body video shows up in the studio of said player. Like in that case, it was Landon Donovan. He was like their big like hero player at the U.S. team, and he would show up on a fake platform. So a platform would show up in the studio, which is called AR. It's augmented reality, right? Same kind of thing as the Super Bowl thing. Um, and now all of a sudden Landon Donovan resonates, and then behind there's a huge 12-foot monitor. And the idea there, which was very different back then, this is before the Mandalorian. Like this is the same technology what the Mandalorian is. Where now instead of putting fake stuff on top of the camera feed, we're actually putting fake stuff in real monitors. But when the camera moves, that content updates, so it looks like a portal. So when you're the telecast, like Mike Tirico was the guy, right? Who's wicked nice, by the way. And so when he's looking at the screen, he sees a really messed up bunch of pixels moving from his eyes. But from the camera's perspective, it looks amazing. It's like perfect. It's all based off the field of view of the camera, where the camera's supposed to be. And it's like projecting from the camera's point of view what the pixels need to be and going in and feeding it into the monitor and updating it. So it gives you this, and the only way you could do that in the past, like a green like square, right? So that was like one of the first, if not the first thing on TV ever that did that. So now fast forward, so that whole stack of like creative and technology, the methodology, and we patented that at Disney, right? That thing. And I think I got like $500 as like a gift, being like, oh, geez, thanks. And then they gave me that Imagineering award for it. So, but the interesting thing was a couple of years later, they call that virtual production. That spawned an entire industry. So when you see Mandalorian and you always see the shots of him, this huge, studio with LED walls everywhere, it is literally the same pattern they're using. I don't like Disney, I don't think ever enforces it because it would kill it. Like that little, like if you read the pad, it's literally like real camera feeding its data and position to another camera that's then taking a real-time rendering engine and feeding its pixels into a LED monitor. It's literally that. So no, in my industry, people are like, yeah, okay, dude, like sure. I'm like, you have no idea. Like it's like it's pretty crazy.
So what I'm hearing is like they owe you a credit in The Mandalorian,
They owe me a
basically.
credit. They owe me a credit in the entire industry, along with my team. Yeah, yeah. That's pretty
That's
crazy.
awesome. Talk to me about the X Games, because I saw you also won an Emmy for working on the X Games. What's that experience
That's that.
like?
That's that right here. I don't have a lot of awards, so I just put them on this little thing. Or I should say I don't have the hardware. I have a lot of awards, but like I didn't get the hardware for them.
Hmm.
So X Games was the best because at ESPN, the reason why I didn't leave after the 2-year plan was because I was about to leave, and a guy who was a consultant there, his name was Michael Gay, and he went and worked for Unreal. He's like been there for 10 years. But then I should say he went to go work for Epic. Unreal's the product that's the game engine for Fortnite.
Hmm.
So he went to go work for them. But prior to that, he was a consultant. He just got hired in this new department called Creative Technology that was all about doing weird, crazy, cool, creative stuff. And their main client, so ESPN, every production's a client, you know what I mean? So like Monday Night Football, like Game Day, College Game Day, X Games, they're all those productions are clients like that would give money to the creative technology department to do cool shit. X Games didn't have any money. They had like very like Monday Night Football, it was like the opposite, right? But Monday Night Football is really hard to get into to do cool shit because everybody wanted that, right? X Games was easy. They just wanted to do really cool shit. So that was like super fun for me because I got to do so much creative stuff and just like blow them away and be like, yeah, like this year we're gonna do this about aliens taking over. It was super fun. And so back then, all the stuff you see now where you see all the augmented reality on the field, like after the stuff that I did, right? You see the Nickelodeon football broadcast, where it's all like goo dripping on the field. That's all the same. It's called AR. All that stuff had not existed yet, right? The only thing that was AR was the yellow line on the first down line in football. That's like AR, but a very primitive kind of technology to do that. But like, so no one was doing really cool creative stuff. So Michael came to me and said, "Listen, dude, I heard you're gonna leave and you're gonna go somewhere else, but man, I want you to head up this." They hired me as like the head of this thing, and I want you to be the guy, the creative guy, to like figure out and help us sell cool things to like X Games and blah blah blah. So that's like why I stayed at ESPN. It like totally changed like my career. And so working for them was awesome because like, I every year I go to Aspen for Winter X. Every year I go to LA for Summer X. And then I went to Austin once for Summer X. And then they announced the global X Games. So I got to go to that idea was a little different. We go ahead and do stuff instead of during the actual events. So I got to go to like Barcelona and Munich and Brazil, like all kinds of crazy places. And then unfortunately, they canceled that initiative. So I got to go, even though like a lot of people didn't get to go because they didn't ever have the broadcast there. I think they ended up having in Munich, I think, or whatever. But X Team was great because it was like we'd go and we would work with their producers and they had like Fox's robot guy. They had their version of that called the Jenga Man. And so we would put him in all kinds of places, like on top of mountains. With we'd put him in the bowl in Venice Beach for LA, all this crazy stuff. And we would use that as like doing some really crazy things that no one's ever done before. And but it like taught me how to be super technical too, because you go out there, you're supposed to like support this as a creative person, but all of a sudden you start to see the camera. You start to see freaking out. You're like, why is this thing freaking out? Well, it's because the camera data is bad. Why is camera data bad? It's coming down fiber optics down a mountain and the video isn't bad and that's carrying the same signal, but like the tolerance of camera data is way more picky than video. So I'd have to get on with a ski patrol guy like holding him bitch style, as he's taking me up the mountain, the snow's hitting me in the face, right? And I have to go with like a fiber optics cleaning kit. I mean, I was trained how to do all this. This is not my thing. Like cleaning it off, getting condensation, because when it was cold out and the sun would rise, condensation would happen on the tips of the glass, which is fiber optics, and then have to clean it. So like I learned so much crazy stuff, and as well as like what is it like to be on the road in a production, and it's a completely different thing. Like it's like a bunch of carnies, man. So they won't help you if you look like you know what you're doing. You know what I mean? So I had to learn how to like properly wrap cable and all that stuff, BNC wires, and that wasn't my thing. But yeah, you gotta like do your time, and so eventually. And all the problems technically that would happen, I knew how to fix them. And when like the engineer of the truck of Monday Night Foot of Sunday of the Super Bowl, the engineer of the truck comes up to you and tries to give you some shit, and like I was at a point where I would argue and win because I knew what I was doing enough. You know what I mean? And so that was crazy. So so that was X Games, and that led to like I was on the road for like half of the season for Monday Night Football because eventually Monday Night Football was like, why aren't we getting the X Games stuff? It's like, well, okay, now you can. So then I'd be on the road for Monday Night Football. So
Going
X Games
from
was awesome.
going from like sport to sport, you talk about like going to Monday Night Football after the X Games. Did you find like certain like creative restrictions depending on the sport you were working or even on like any other work you did? Like did that have to change going from the X Games to Monday Night Football? And then in turn, like how did you cater your work to each individual sport?
Yeah, like kind of to my point before, because X Games didn't have the money, they were more flexible at having having me as the creative person suggest stuff. Monday Night Football, there's so many chiefs, so many people involved in that. It was way harder, like to get crazy cool ideas listened to. World Cup was the same way. Like I had some amazing ideas, and then like in meetings, the executives would be like, why would we do that? And then they'd shut it down. And like 2 years later, they ended up doing it because they saw it as some trade show. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so, as a creative, you learn to, I learned early on in Southie, I had an art director. He was like, dude, because I think I had 90% of my work like obliterated because like the last second a client was like, now we're not doing that. Like, I've been working on this for 3 months. Like, so my art director there at Southie was like, dude, listen, man, if you can just get, if any project you can get 5% of your creative ideas, whether it's the color of the logo, like you just got to hold on to that because you'll go crazy if you hold on to everything. So I always look at a good creative person or creative director as the talented creative director, somebody who can actually have tons of guardrails, but still be creative within those guardrails. It's when you have no guardrails and you smoke a doobie and come up with cool ideas. That's not as hard. Not like I've done that,
Mm.
but yeah. So I think yeah. So going from a complete Monday Night Football was a completely different culture. You know what I mean? Like in terms of like the the client, you know, uh way more corporate, X Games is way less, and then World Cup was very different too. Uh but it was similar to Monday Night Football. It was like high end, like tons of people working on it, tons of eyeballs approving it. Um Trying to think where else I did stuff for college football. I did some stuff for, not a lot. That was fun. That was like a little somewhere in between, you know. They were always keen on doing cool shit too, like trying new stuff, being the first. That was kind of always a thing in my career. I always want to be the first to do something. Um, and then going to CBS. So then when I broke out of ESPN, I started freelancing for different places. So that was CBS Sports was that, and then esports was fun. So like, I mean, so like working on League of Legends in South Korea, right? Where they these. It's hard for me to consider it a sport, but it is. You know what I mean? In the culture.
In
And it's
the I'm in the same boat. I was gonna say I saw the work on the esports, and I definitely wanted to bring it up. I saw the League of Legends, and then like the Injustice and like Street
yeah,
Fighter World Championships too.
yeah. Those are super fun. That's super creative. Like for me, because it's like, it's a creative canvas anyway. Like it's a video game. Here's myself. Um, but like what I respected out of that was the fan base. Oh, I did WrestleMania too. So I went from WrestleMania with 100,000 people screaming their heads off at in Dallas, the Dallas Stadium. And then, like, I don't know, like a few months later or whatever, I remember going to South Korea where there's 30,000 people in the stands looking on the stage. And that was like a cross between sports and like music. Because like Madison Beers and a whole bunch of K-pop dancers and singers were part of the whole performance. And they were dancing with digital doubles of the new skins of the game, but special powers and stuff. But like hearing 30,000 people freak out and be louder than the fans in Dallas for WrestleMania, I got like I had a respect for that. I was like, oh my God, they freaking out. Like, oh my God, there's Akira, that in her new outfit with her new powers, like right there on the displays and stuff. I was like, that was pretty crazy. And then knowing that it was like, because that was being broadcast in China, like that was like 3 or 4 times more than Super Bowl. It was like 300 million people were watching it at the same time. So that was pretty cool. It's been, I was like, this is people, this is their world, man. So why can't it be considered a sport? I mean, it's competition. It's like
Absolutely.
wipeout's a sport. I mean, I don't know. You know, but yeah, that was that for me, that was creative. So it was totally fun. I could do crazy stuff, like have laser beams shoot out of Superman's eyes and burn the stage, And then when Batman came flying down and all the commentaries like, oh damn, you know, it was
That was
cool.
a fun video to watch.
Yeah.
Because like all the superheroes flying down, like to start with like Wonder Woman hitting the shield too. But that one was also super interesting because the fans were going insane for that too. Like everyone was going nuts. Like, and they I can't see the augmented reality on them around them
You see it
except for
on
like on the
screens.
screen. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the
Um,
thing, you know, it's kind of cool. The experience, the experiential part, that's cool. The fan perspective. Yeah.
Absolutely. And fans like really do make like any live sporting event. So getting to see like the mixedly augmented reality with the fans was super special. So another question I had for you was like through like all of your experiences working on sports and seeing so much of this either through like a broadcast booth or live, um, what fan bases like stick out to you the most, would you say? Having seen like so much going from football to even like wrestling fan base, which is different at WrestleMania, or the X Games, which has got to be like a completely different thing too. Like through all of it, like which ones would you say like stick out the most? Not even necessarily just being like the loudest, but even like just like the most different.
Yeah, probably wrestling, like WWE. You know what I mean? Because it's like it's really cool. Because when you're looking, you see all the fans and they're like dressed up like their favorite, athlete personas or whatever. I'm trying to think who was like Roman Reigns was back then, and oh my God, who are the other? There's a bunch of them, but yeah. So you walk around and it almost looked like a cosplay, like at like Comic
Yeah.
Con thing, it was like that. So I feel like those are the fans that are like really, I mean, like obviously NFL, college football, right? Like that, like I don't think you're getting any bigger fans than like going to a Penn State game or something, where it's like insane, or Alabama, like where they live for that stuff, or like they'll kill for it. World Cup, oh man, that's actually World Cup, dude. I remember I got to break away and go to the arena because the all in South Africa they had like nine, I think it was nine stadiums all over Africa, like over South Africa, and the one closest was Johannesburg. That's where I was. And I remember like I gotta go get see one of these games, and so they had a really cool arena. And then it would remind me of Gladiator because you're walking in, and you couldn't hear anything. Like, oh my gosh, like what? And also you pass this, you go into the Coliseum. It's like it's like crazy. Everybody's like, that was when they had the vuvuzelas, like, it was like really annoying horns and stuff. That was like an African thing. And it was Uruguay, I think it was Uruguay and Argentina. That was who was playing. And it was nuts. People were like everyone was painted, flags, huge flag. That's different, right? Like that soccer versus like football. It's like these major banners are huge, they're blowing in the wind and stuff. It's all drama. It was pretty epic. But yeah, I think I think of fans, it's like esports, wrestling, like WWE, or like soccer for sure. Or like, it's not what we call soccer or football.
Yep.
But I mean, like, I never did a UFC thing, but I'm pretty sure that's going to be what if I went and did if I at this point, if I was working for a UFC, like mixed martial arts broadcast, I'm sure it's crazy too.
Those fans are dedicated. Two of my first guests that I had on for the sports perspective were two of my good buddies. One of them was my buddy Jack, who works an internship with me, and then my buddy Brandon, who I did the play-by-play with. And we talked a lot about like the UFC, just because it's been like so up and coming in the last couple of years, and the way like obviously they're two completely different individuals, but the way like all the huge UFC fans talk about that sport, like the dedication, knowing every single name, how they fight, even down to like the minor cards or like Bellator, it's absolutely insane.
It is nuts. And like your cousins, Maddie. So Maddie, remember he was a hockey player for 14 years.
Yep.
And I always knew if that ever came to an end, like what would he do, man? Like would he like just turns to the bad side and just hit the streets? But instead he went immediately to MMA. He does it 6 days a week. He trains with this guy in New Britain, Connecticut, he's fought John Jones.
Oh my
He goes
goodness.
to Mohegan. He's like a really legit dude. He's like super nice. I can't remember his name, but so you got PJ, your youngest cousin for my kids. He's into it too. They're all like unlimited. They go all like 5 days a week now, 6 days a week. So they love it. I'm like, I can't. I always am like, dude, you're gonna get like every few. Actually, I think he's only had a black eye once, Maddie. But I'm like, you can have the cauliflower ears, they're like nasty and stuff, but they absolutely love it and are in love with it. And like Maddie will take PJ to like Mohegan to watch like, and I think they're going to Vegas. Like they're super into it. It's like addictive.
Wow.
So I get it.
Yeah.
So now I'm like, I'll go to Buffalo Wild Wings and watch it with them, I'm like, so I think like it's interesting like about sports how now when you have kids and they're into sports, that like took me along for the ride in the sports world. Like PJ, he's like the biggest Celtics fan. Like, he loves basketball and Celtics, and he's always, what I mean, so football, like so he's really, it's just like a continued draw. It's just a common thread in, not everyone's, but like in the life. Like, I know you're like obviously you're massive in the sport, so it's just like it's a cool thing to have and to share with your family and friends that like the love of sports.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like an interesting subject area too, because you've like, such a different experience with this. So after like growing up in an area where, you only really had like little league sports, how important for you was it to like cultivate like that love for sports and like that competitiveness in your children following that? Was that like a definitely like an area for you that you had to hit, or was it more of a thing that just happened?
No, I mean, I always wanted. I was like, and I remember telling your aunt Nicole that I was like, this is like every one of my kids has to do something. Like even if they don't like sports, they have to do something. Like they have to do like music or whatever. Like that alone was like my major thing. But I always
Hmm.
wanted them to do sports. You know what I mean? Like I have three boys, and two of them do sports, and one of them isn't interested at all. He's more interested in creative. So I don't like I don't force it, you know what I mean? But at the same time, I love it. And the funny thing is for me that I don't know why it was when I was young, I always wanted to do rowing, like crew. I think I saw like some movie or something, like it was like they made it so what's the word? Like oh my God, I'm looking for the word, but like fantasy. It was like a fantasy about for me. Like it was like School Ties or some movies that like there was always that like under thread of like rowing and stuff, and like it was like in Harvard on the Charles. I was like that's sick. So, but I never like I lived barely had organized baseball, let alone crew. So when I moved to Glassbury, Connecticut, they're like the number 5 on the Eastern Seaboard. Like I think they only are shined by oh my God, it's not Duxbury. It's a town near Duxbury. Where's Uncle Steve from?
Oh, trying to think of the other towns around there.
Hingham.
Hingham.
Not from
Yep.
Hingham, but Hingham. So Hingham is like way up there, like number 2 or something. So we had to play. So anyway, I always wanted my kids to like, okay, you're gonna do crew. You're absolutely gonna do crew, and then they wouldn't do crew. Great, like I would. And so the only one that actually did it last year was PJ.
Oh wow.
It was awesome, man. It was like like he was his first year freshman, so he didn't get to race a lot. When we raced, so go and they go up to the Charles and they do the regatta. I think it's called the regatta or something, and it was really cool. So, like me being 52 years old, I was like, oh, and been talking to parents like, oh, there's a men's league in Hartford. I'm like, really? I was like, what the heck am I like? Why am I gonna live vicariously through these kids? I'm just like, do it myself. So I started in January. I started rowing, training in the boathouse in Hartford. And in May it starts, so I'll be like out on the water in May for the first time ever. And I'm like psyched. I put
That's gonna be awesome.
my pink sweater on, like all yup, stroke. No, I get kidding. That'll be awesome, man. It's like so like and working out like the gym, if you consider that as some form of fitness and sport, like that's always
Mhm.
been something I've always been into. And like over the last 2 years, I've been hardcore in like 6 days a week, like and I think you just people need it, man. Like you need whether you're into I understand why you might be not into sports like team sports, but but if you can do individual sports like tennis or swimming or track, like you need or climbing indoor climbing like whatever it is dude like I think it's good for everybody and I know team sports like with Matty watching him for the 14 years and all the different teams he's played for in hockey and stuff like that absolutely sculpted him into all kinds of things that he has right now like he has total determination and he's like like he has respect when he talks to other people, and like it totally teaches you stuff. You know that, man, being on teams yourself.
Absolutely.
It's a thing that like I said, I've missed pretty much, you know. And I think I have such respect for sport in general and team sports. It's like it's a no brainer. And then like ended up, I was like a coach in football for like 4 years. So I was like the assistant. I was the offensive lineman coach because PG was an offensive lineman. So that was, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was like literally YouTubing it and like, you know, but it was fun. They're like, okay, coach, what do we do now? I'm like, you know, oh, we're gonna do this skills training, you know. But yeah, I think I didn't like force it. I definitely it was something I was like really hoping for that like my kids would be you know be into it. So um yeah.
Yeah, I think sports super important on all levels. That's part of like the point of my senior project, my show, I guess. But that the rowing is awesome. I didn't know that you were doing that now. I feel like those
Yeah.
sports that can be just like done. Um, Fencing's another one where
Oh yeah.
I'd be at fencing tournaments and there'd be like a lot of kids my age, a lot of, 20 or 30-year-olds that would always like kick the crap out of me when I was showing up at like the age of 17. But then there'd be even like, there were tournaments, they'd have nationals for like 80-year-old guys too. So it's just a sport that people will
Crazy.
do like forever, forever, which I
Why
think
not,
is really
man?
impressive. Yeah.
Like when you get my age, you're like, all right, well, that ship has sailed. I might as well live. But then I was like, when I heard, I'm like, why the fuck? So like,
Yeah.
and I'm actually in pretty good shape now, dude. I wicked am. But like, when I went to that rowing class, like it was like a spin class for old ladies, but on rowing. Like that's how it is. And it wasn't like dudes in there, right? And like I remember Deb on one side helped me, and Nancy on the other, and they're kicking my ass. Like they're cranking out the watts. Like it's all about like the watts on the rowing
hmm
machine. And they were like just ragging on me, dude. I was like, they're like, you're way younger and way stronger than us. So why are your watts so low? I was like, dude, that cuts deep, Nance. You know? So
Yeah.
it's like because it's muscles you're using. Like rowing
Oh
is
yeah.
like, it's not like your back, it's most of your legs when you're rowing. So
Absolutely.
it's
Um,
my inner thighs were like, oh my God, I couldn't even walk after that. Like, because you're doing an hour, like it's straight up an hour, like 2 minute breaks in between 14-minute sessions and stuff. You're just like done. But
yeah.
I know that once I get on the water, I'm not gonna know that. I'm gonna see like the birds and the ducks flying around and just the winds. Like I'm pretty psyched for that. But right now, the boat if they've canceled a few weekends because like it's like flooded. Like the boathouse is
Oh,
literally
what?
yeah, 'cause it's right next to the river, so the river
Oh
rises.
yeah.
Yeah, but we have like our that's in Hartford though. But the riverfront area in Glastonbury is like legit. It's all new boathouse. Like it's pretty cool. It's awesome to have. And each one of those boats are like $50,000. So like legit. It's not a cheap sport, I guess, for a town, but we got our asses beat by Hingham, man. Go Mass. And like our kids were all like kind of like flaccid out of shape, and those dudes were like Drago. Like every one of them were like just
Just
ripped,
huge. Wow.
huge, just shredding, like totally like military, same age. And our kids were all like half of them are, I think a lot of kids go into crew who are like just kind of not athletic potentially, like they're like wicked, like good students because they know, just like I know, that scholarship potential in rowing is like way better than anything else.
Oh
So
yeah.
like,
High school fencing was the same way. I
yeah,
showed up and I was always, my grades weren't like perfect. I was not a very good student like early in high
come
school.
on, man, don't do that.
I showed up because like I love fencing, and then there were all these other we had like a couple like super geniuses on the team that never like played any sports before, any sports recently, and were showing up like one for like scholarship potential, and then two even just like the communities in like sports is different. Like all the kids on like the fencing team would just be like recruiting all these guys, and they'd be doing captains practices or whatever. I was running like cross country, and so I showed up like I missed like all the captain's practices because I was running. I showed up the first day. I was getting asked like all these questions about like, oh yeah, like this and that, and like no one had ever asked if I'd like fenced before. So I'm sitting there kind of interested. I'm like, huh, like what's going on here? And then we get like on the strip, we start fencing. I'm like, oh, okay. Um,
It's awesome, man.
yeah. So we are just about running out of time. I did want to ask you one more question. Having done like so much, media in general is always going to be like a very cutting edge industry, and then like visual effects and graphics production, especially so, is super cutting edge. So having done so much in the industry, what is your advice for like people on the other side trying to get in? Like, what do you think you did to really separate yourself to earn so many opportunities?
I just grinded, man. I loved it, right? So from that minute I saw the clip art, and it's like I just loved it. I was passionate about it, and I remember like I felt it was tangible. Like it was digital, but you're creating something. It's like, okay, what's different between that and like being a carpenter building a house, right? It's like it's something you're creating, and so I was passionate about it. ESPN, man, I'd work, getting paid for 40 hours a week. I worked the second shift, so I'd stay instead of leaving at 11 o'clock at night, I'd stay till 3 in the morning, like and crank and learn new stuff and like push. And my reputation at ESPN was like pushing, you know. And like there's people in my industry that have moved, like they're still pretty close to making what they made. And I think I'm doing pretty good in the industry because I've always pushed and pushed and pushed. Now, like but because your tools are always changing. Like I don't know how often a hammer upgrades and becomes a different tool. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure when it went from a hammer to a nail gun, people had to learn a nail gun. But it's like every week something's changing. And now the big thing within my industry, which is like it's wicked volatile, is AI, right? Because now anybody, like my mom, who knows how to talk to AI, can say, "Hey, I need a business card that's like whatever," and it's like if it's good, and in the industry too, it's becoming a situation where it's good enough. It also like social media, right? ESPN broadcast, super pristine, like really great production value, and suddenly social media shows up. I remember at WrestleMania, we had this new team called like the social media video crew, and they were shooting on like lower end cameras. They're not doing anything fancy. They're getting it up right away, up into and the content up, and that created this like desensitization to like really high production content. No one cares. So in my world, the AI world, like it's sort of doing that. It's like, who cares if it looks a little weird and AI-ish, if it's cool, like, so instead of me being afraid of that, I learn it and I'm learning it to be a tool for me to be more efficient in certain areas so I can spend more time in the areas that AI cannot do yet. So I think the advice is just like don't be afraid of learning new things every single day if you're going to get into what I do. If you're going to be in the media, visual effects, image-based visuals, storytelling, like it's important to have an education on the craft. Like, you need to know design and design layout and visual communication strategies and color theory and all those things. Like that's super, you know what I mean? Like, because AI is going to give it what it knows based off of what people have done in the past. It's not going to make these art direction decisions for you as a human being. It can't like, and also like being able to understand a human to a human communication, like being able to recommend certain things. And like, you need to, if you're using AI as a tool, you need to understand all of that fundamental stuff. But then once you get into the industry, you have to be willing to open your mind and learn all the time. Like you're never gonna stop, like ever. I thought I'd stop by now. I'm like, but now AI came like, great, I can learn more stuff. Otherwise, I mean, that's good and bad, right? Like if that's the industry you choose, that's the con with it. Like
Mhm.
you're not gonna like, but that's why you have to love it. If you don't love it, it's gonna be just grueling, or you're gonna suck at it and not make any money. And then the last part of that is if so what you did is the best, right? You're like creating content immediately before you even graduate college. So you're the head start with all the other dudes who are drinking beers and stuff, waiting to graduate. You're like, oh, what am I gonna do in my life? Well, dude, like, so like because the tools are there. Like you could look, kids are using Photoshop at like junior, like elementary school now. So
Oh
like,
yeah.
you know what I mean? So like if a kid comes up to me and is like, oh, I'm a junior in high school. I want to do this for a living. Like I want to be a filmmaker. Okay, cool. So what are you doing at home? Like, well, nothing yet. And like, well, you just like movies. Like you don't want to be a filmmaker, like, right? Because otherwise you'd be doing it. You have the tools. Last Christmas, did you ask for a camera? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so what you're doing just proves that. Like you already have a head start. You're working already in the industry, right? In college and doing that stuff. So I mean, you gotta be willing to do that. If you want to get into this industry, you gotta be willing to do what you're doing.
Absolutely. That's a great point, great tip of advice for anybody looking to get in. With that, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh man,
Um,
thanks for inviting me.
of course, it was a great conversation. And for everybody at home, thank you very much for listening, and I will catch you in the next one. Thank you for watching this episode of The Sports Perspective. Make sure to look out for the rest of our content and leave a comment down below.